Hi. Greetings from Wisdom Lord Raphael. Before we start, please hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell icon and don't miss any content. This is the light novel of that time I got reincarnated as a slime. If you haven't watched previous video, I will leave the link on the description box, or you can click here. Let's start. This is Tensura Light Novel Volume 17. Tensura Light Novel. Volume 17. Fragments Across Space-Time. Chapter 2. Distant Memories. Imperial Instigator. It was the fateful day for the survival of mankind. In Conference Room 2, which had changed overnight, Velgrin nodded with satisfaction. In front of her was a set of communication equipment and a plush chair. Soft cushions were provided for her comfort. The spacious room had been cleared of extraneous equipment and was ready to receive the visiting heads of state. Snacks and beverages are available near the wall, and there are several waiters standing in line. The furnishings were elegant and carefully considered so as not to diminish the dignity of the kingdom. I like it. You did well, Yamamoto. Ha. Thank you. Just to hear you say that, I, Yamamoto, feel like I'm in heaven. A man who specializes in brown nosing. Yamamoto Kanji. Through the supervision of a once-in-a-lifetime supervisor, he succeeded in gaining recognition from Velgrind. Incidentally, this is truly an achievement, since Velgrind's eyes are unusually discerning. Even the military officials who came to check on the situation were impressed by how well he managed to do this in just one night. Even the subordinates who had responded to Yamamoto's recklessness were beaming with pride. Well, we're running out of time, so let's get started. Velgrind sits in the chair. With the grace of a dominatrix, yet still swift. She handled the communication equipment. The first caller is the United States of Azalia. George Kun, how are you? Oh, yeah. It's good to hear from you, how nostalgic. Everything is as usual, so it's a mess. But I'm relieved that you haven't changed, if that's strange to say. President George is understandably confused. After all, he was coming to the Empire through the space-time connection without even bothering to say hello on the phone. Even the Azalian government ministers who came with him can't believe their eyes. Yufufu. I couldn't have changed. It may have been 25 years for you, but for me, we just parted ways a few days ago. Oh, I see. Velgrind and George are chatting about the past. Yamamoto moves so as not to interrupt their conversation. With a casual glance, the servers begin to work. Even the confused Azalians seem to take a breather and their heads start to spin. Beside them, Velgrind was having a lively conversation. It's been a long time ago. Thanks to that man, I didn't have to be bored every day. I heard that you always went along with my dad's big legalities. Yeah. The day before the typhoon, it'll clear up tomorrow was a big deal. I know, that story. He told me that story over and over. Thanks to you, you really made it better. Well. There was a baseball game that day and the neighborhood kids were looking forward to it. He was always teasing them and lying about it all the time. Maybe that's why. Wouldn't it be nice if my words came true once in a while? He said. You know, I was really surprised how it made me work. Everyone was struck by the story that the typhoon had disappeared. You're kidding. You don't even want to hide that you're not normal. Some couldn't hide their surprise. Without realizing it, or even if they did, they didn't care. The conversation between Velgrind and the president continued. That's amazing, Velgrind. I'm no match for you, you know everything. That's not true. I'm just worried about you, you're like my son. Fufu, thanks. I guess I'm not a good person to talk to about this kind of thing, as a representative of the state. Still, you're the only person I know who can help me. Can you help me? Of course. Because you're the son of my beloved Laurent Hayes, the genius scammer. George bursts into tears when he hears this. Then, after muttering to help his son, he started talking about the situation. Things have gotten pretty ugly, from what is heard. The US Department of Defense is already aware that the US military in Azalia has been hijacked by the Phantom. Worst of all, Fleet Commander-in-Chief David Reagan has sent a messenger with a demand to the government. The demand is that the United States government accept the demon's control. The demon's goal is not to end humanity. They want to rule this world and build their own paradise. That's why they thought that if they destroyed the organization that governed the nation, it would be too much trouble to deal with afterwards. The demon's goal is to enslave mankind. They want to keep bodies to replace their own in case their numbers grow. It would be better to have slaves under control, but there are 5 spheres of influence in this world. The destruction of one of them would only serve as an example to the rest of the world. Alright. I promise to cooperate to the best of my ability. Let's hope the meetings will be fruitful. With that, George stands up. The Azalia government ministers who had been watching in silence followed suit. The discussion is over. Yamamoto gave the signal, and an usher immediately opened the door. Then, I will show you to your waiting room. Everyone seemed relieved to hear Velgrin's strong words. With words of thanks, they left the room as they were led away. Velgrin's next call was from the Holy Arsha Empire. An incomprehensible space-time connection had brought them across the sea. If you imagine their feelings, it's impossible not to get confused. It's a secret place that only a few people know, so how can, why? One of the ministers muttered. Velgrin, overhearing this, snorts boringly. If you don't want to be located, use isolation or barrier whenever possible to cut off all contact with the outside world. Even then, air currents and such will leak out, so it's probably impossible for you to hide. Communicating with the outside world. Do you mean you traced a radio signal to the location where we were hiding? One of the young men spoke up. Because he was carrying a mythical grade bow, Velgrin realized that he must be one of the 7 vessels. But she's not particularly interested, so she just says, that's right. The Arsha crowd is in an uproar, but it's not Velgrin who has to deal with it. It's like a joke to her, so she doesn't make a fuss about it. And there was another who was arrogant. So you're Velgrin. I am Zhang, the emperor of Arsha of this world. You're the one who claims to be Kaldina, the goddess who gave blessings to Emperor Shin, my grandfather, right? A handsome young man in his early 20s with blonde hair and blue eyes and a well-proportioned body. He was Zhang Yulendored Arsha, the apex emperor of the Holy Arsha Empire. Kaldina. Oh, that's what I was called. I've heard it said that it's awe-inspiring to call me by my true name, or something like that, but I didn't think that the nickname was more established. Maybe my real name isn't in the records. You still won't admit it? How laughable. Or did you think that your good looks would absolve you of your delusion? He chalked up Velgrin's statement as a lie and refused to listen to it. That attitude was a big problem. If the top brass made a mistake, an apology often wouldn't suffice. If this was a subordinate's outburst, then that person alone could be held responsible. Or the higher-ups might be able to get away with an apology. But if the chief executive makes a wrong choice, the consequences may be irreversible. There was one more person who was troubled by this situation. It was Yamamoto Kanji. Oh my god, the Lord of Arsha is an unbelievable jerk. What should we do now? If nothing is done, the fearsome Ryo Dono will become angry. Since it was not just another person's affair, Yamamoto racked his brain frantically. The first thing he did was to send a message to his aides. Bring His Majesty to me as soon as possible. But that's not. Fool. I know this is impolite, but only His Majesty can stop Ryo Dono. That was so true that even his aides are struck dumb by his opinion. Yes. As soon as he whispered his approval, the aides scurried away. Yamamoto Kanji, normally a pompous buffoon, but he had a real talent for spotting people who should not be crossed. He used this ability without regret to prepare for this crisis. While everyone around him felt threatened, one man was at ease in making that statement. Kaku, are you speechless, knowing that I'm not so easily fooled? Well, that's just as well. A scammer like you might not know this, but I'm not like the rest of the foolish ones. I, too, have been approved by the gods. The 7th seat of the 7 sacred vessels. That is the one you've been trying to take in. The true identity of the person who did it. Zhang said proudly. These words were true, and at Zhang's waist hung a shining mythical grade sword. Of course, Velgrin also knows. She was just too dumbfounded to speak before that. At the same time as she lamented, it occurred to Velgrin that she hadn't responded to his call. But she can only say it's a shame in more ways than one if he doubts his opponent when told something only he knows. If you were told a secret and you still didn't believe it, then you were out of the question. Idiot. Did you mean me? It's a pity you can't understand such things. But it sounds like you've got more than 4,000 years of history behind you, so I suppose it's no wonder your bloodline has deteriorated. Velgrin chuckles. She was appalled by Zhang's outburst, but she was not so narrow-minded as to be offended by it. But Zhang was furious. You still haven't stopped acting, and even taunted me. Foolishness. Then I will ask you. You not only deceive the goddess's name with impudence, but you claim to be able to recreate her deeds, don't you? If you say you can make the sacred artifacts, let's see it. However, prepare yourself. And if you fail to do so, that's when your disguise will come undone. That's so troublesome. I don't want excuses. You spoke of something impossible, and you will pay for it. What? I'm not going to kill you. It seems that you are good at what you do, and have some ability. You can rest assured that you will be kept as my companion. Zhang talked stupid nonsense all the way. Everyone aside from Velgrin and Zhang watched with bated breath to see what would happen. Although Zhang's words and actions were clearly wrong, they saw a glimmer of hope in the patience of Velgrin, who was quick to anger. Everyone looks at Velgrin, praying that this story will be settled. You can't do it anyway. There's a lot to say, but oh well. It was promised, so I'll prepare it for you. As if to interrupt Zhang's words, Velgrin made a blue dragon sword appear. It was created with matter creation by solidifying her own magic element. This is fine. You guys may not be able to handle it anyway, but it has unmistakable mythical grade capabilities. What? Zhang received it unexpectedly and was mesmerized by the brilliance of the blue dragon sword. He didn't need to doubt Velgrin's words, it had a real glow to it. As a king, Zhang was not entirely incompetent. Although he is arrogant, he is not a tyrant and has the decency to listen to his subordinates. Since this was the first summit meeting of the 5 great powers, he was more stubborn than usual to avoid being stepped on. It was his revenge. It was only then that Zhang realized his mistake. And much to his consternation, Zhang is confused. Perhaps because he was related to the man who was Rudra, Velgrin had a soft spot in her heart for Zhang. If this were an unrelated person, the negotiations would have been over long ago. It was more than likely that blood would have been spilled. And yet, Zhang didn't realize his good fortune. On the contrary. Wait, what? If the mythical goddess is real, then she deserves me. Yes, that's right. If I can have the goddess, all of my problems will be over. As if he had just come up with a brilliant plan of recovery, he did something outrageous. Kakaku, is that so? Oh goddess, Velgrin. Have you crossed time and space to meet me? Love me? Very well. I will return the feeling. I will take you as my wife and swear that I will love you. In front of the crowd he burst into multiple misunderstandings. This confuses Velgrin. Huh? What kind of joke are you making? Don't be embarrassed. It's wartime now. I can't show you now, but when everything's settled, I'll make you my queen. I heard the emperor didn't have any children with the goddess, but do you think she'll have any with me? If we can bring in the blood of the goddess, Arsha will be ready for a time of further development. Velgrin was speechless at the astonishingly rapid pace in which he was running. She had never been so insulted before and was at a loss for words. It's not that she can't keep up with it or that she didn't want to understand it. It was proof that even a person who was good at calculation could lose their heads. Aside from Velgrin, the audience's reactions were mixed. It was the people of the 7 sacred vessels who paled. Stop it, your majesty. One wanted to scream at him, but held back and signaled to the ministers with his eyes. He instinctively knew that this was going to be a terrible thing if nothing was done. How could a man hope to bend the goddess to his will? Zhang must be silenced before the goddess's punishment was doled out. And yet the ministers wouldn't act. Or, rather, they couldn't. The blank expression on Velgrin's face made her good look stand out. And it felt very scary. It was because his heart was dependent on his own actions. He couldn't expect the ministers to do any more. The 7 sacred vessels grew impatient and turned to their leader. And so Bride is left to bemoan his misfortune. The empire was no stranger to this. The bureaucrats of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Intelligence Department, who were nervous before the meeting, thought that the Imperial of Arsha would not be such a fool. That was gutsy of him, but if Velgrin got angry, everyone would be collateral damage. They all agreed that they didn't want that to happen. What do you think? It's a wonderful proposal. Even if you spend the rest of your life, you won't be loved much by an old man who doesn't have much life left in him. I, on the other hand, would spend every night. What? The air in the room froze. Everyone realized that what they had feared had come true. Velgrin's anger was taken seriously, and Zhang went rigid. He realizes his stupidity, but couldn't swallow the words he was saying. What the hell is this divine energy? Mythical goddess, this is even more than I imagined. How could I have imagined such a supernatural existence being my queen? Incoherent thoughts flashed through Zhang's brain. Then he realized the stupidity of his folly. Taking in the blood of the goddess seemed like a really great idea. That may be true in and of itself, but there are things you can do and things you can't do. Even the god emperor, who was said to be loved by the goddess, was no match for the goddess to give birth to a son. Even his descendant, Zhang, was not even worthy of the goddess's favor. And the goddess's character as described in the literature was, even as rumored, quite harsh. She even tried to destroy the country when someone she loved was insulted. Excavations in the region, following the literature, had uncovered traces of the city's existence in the buried Trotta. The outer walls of the excavated buildings are reported to have been melted by the ultra-high temperature and turned into glass. For some reason, Zhang remembered such information only now. Zhang paled as he saw a future where the nations of Arsha would be consumed by the fiery flames. Perhaps he had violated the greatest ban on war, but that's behind him. It would have been Zhang's complete ruin, but someone made a move. It was Yamamoto. If he allowed Velgrin to run amok, he would be held fully responsible. Their lives were at stake before that, but that was of secondary importance to Yamamoto. Yamamoto was not normally a pompous and hardworking man, but he wasn't so corrupt that he would run away from his responsibilities when the time came. Rather, he knew that someone had to take the blame when the war broke out, and he thought it was his role to do so. It was precisely because of Yamamoto that he was able to act before anyone else when he heard Zhang's statement. What are you making so much noise about? The emperor, who had profusely been asked for help, arrived just in time. Your Majesty. Oh, Ryuo, don't let the young man's words deceive you. Zhang Dono must have tried it to see if you're really worthy of trust. When Sakura Akira arrived, he called out to Velgrind in a calm manner. He was inwardly impatient, and this was the first time in decades that he had run down the corridor, but he showed no sign of that. He really was a majestic champion. Seeing such an Akira Sakura, Velgrind forgot her anger. She regained her composure and examined the words she was told. I dared to find out how much anger I would have to get angry by caressing my emotions against me. Isn't that right? Anyway, it was Akira Sakura who wanted to convince Velgrind. He thought it didn't matter that he was insulted if he could mend the situation. For all that, his wish came true. Oh, so that's what happened. I didn't want to think Shin's descendants were that stupid, so that makes sense. Velgrind nodded widely and smiled. It was so beautiful and gentle that it relieved Akira Sakura. Now, since the Arsha people are probably tired, you may show them to the waiting room. When the moment arises, Akira gives the instructions. Normally, the emperor wouldn't do this himself, but this was a time where he had no choice. As if the magic was broken, everyone started to work together and the great danger had subsided. Incidentally, in a later version of Arsha, there are many pro-Japanese families, but the Yamamoto surname in particular has become immensely popular. He is even listed in history textbooks as the man who saved Arsha from the crisis. He is described as the friend who admonished the then King Zhang, though Yamamoto never knew about it himself. That's all for today, hope you guys enjoy it. Please check my other videos. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and hit the notification icon. And don't miss any updates. Thank you for watching.